This is my true story. My daughter mocked me for being poor. She called me a burden in front of her friends, sneered at my old coat, and laughed at my small meals. She thought I had nothing. She thought she was safe to humiliate me because I depended on her. But she didn't know the truth. For 30 years, I had hidden gold bars in silence, piece by piece, waiting for the day patience would speak louder than pride. I stayed quiet. I smiled. And then I made my move. You won't believe what I did next. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and please subscribe so more people hear my story. For 30 years, I let the world believe I was poor. I wore the mask so well that even my own daughter thought it was true. My hands were bent from work, my coat was old and patched, my shoes worn thin. At the market, I counted coins slowly, letting people see me hesitate before handing them over. I ate quiet meals at the corner table of small diners, never ordering more than bread and soup. Neighbors pitied me. Strangers shook their heads. My daughter sneered. She called me hopeless, weak, useless. She told her friends that her father was a man who never achieved anything. They laughed with her. She thought I did not notice. I noticed everything. But every time she mocked me, I smiled to myself. Because what she did not know was that my poverty was only on the surface. I let the world see what I wanted them to see. An old man with nothing. But in secret, I was building something greater than they could ever imagine. Every time I wore that thrifted coat, I knew beneath the floorboards there was a piece of gold waiting. Every time I walked home with an empty pocket, I knew in the garden, under the stones, another secret bar rested. It was not easy to pretend. Pride is a hard thing to bury. When she laughed at me in front of her friends, when she pointed to my worn coat at family dinners, my heart burned. But I swallowed it. I let her believe her words had cut me. I let the room laugh at the poor old man. Because while they laughed, I was preparing. Patience is a weapon sharper than anger. I held it close. I ate less, so I could save more. I lived in silence, so I could hide more. I let the paint peel on the house, let the furniture stay old, let the neighbors think I could not afford repairs. They did not know that every coin I saved, every small sacrifice, became part of something much larger. My daughter thought I was weak. I was building strength in shadows. When she paraded her new shoes, her new car, her big parties, I sat in my old coat. I listened when she said, "Look at him. He can't even buy himself a decent meal." And I nodded, smiling softly, because I knew something she did not. The gold beneath my floor, the bars in my hidden safe, the weight of 30 years of patience, all of it waited quietly, like a storm behind calm skies. I did not correct her. I did not shout at her. I did not defend myself. I let her think her words were true. I let her friends laugh. I let the family whisper. Because pretending to be poor was my greatest shield. If they thought I had nothing, they would never try to take what I had. And if she thought I was weak, she would never see the moment coming when I finally showed her the truth. So I wore poverty like a cloak. Ragged on the outside, golden on the inside. 30 years of silence. 30 years of patience, 30 years of letting them think they were above me. And every day, my hidden wealth grew, while their respect for me shrank. But I did not need their respect. I only needed time. And time was always on my side. While my daughter laughed at me, I was working in silence. Every small job I took, every long night I labored, I saved something from it. Not much at once, just enough to go unnoticed. A coin here, a scrap there, a little piece of gold when I could manage it. People waste money on wine, parties, and clothes. I saved mine and turned it into something that would never lose its value. I started small. A single gold coin bought quietly from a man who needed fast money. I kept it in an old tin under the floorboards. One coin became two. Then I found ways to buy bullion, little bars that could be carried in the palm of my hand. I learned to keep my purchases hidden. No one saw me bring them home. No one knew where I put them. I spoke of nothing, told no stories, left no traces. I built hiding places with my own hands. A false floorboard under my bed where a row of coins lay flat. A safe buried beneath stones in the garden, heavy and silent, its code known only to me. Behind an old cabinet, I hollowed out space in the wall. In the attic, I placed sealed boxes that looked like nothing more than junk. Every piece of gold was hidden like a secret heartbeat, silent but alive. Years passed. My daughter showed off her new handbags, her shining cars, her loud parties. She told her friends, "My father has nothing. He is poor." And I sat quietly, letting them believe it. Meanwhile, I was stacking my future, piece by piece, bar by bar. 30 years of patience, 30 years of careful planning, 30 years of letting their insults slide off my back while my secret wealth grew. It was not greed that drove me, it was survival. I had seen men work their whole lives for paper money, only to lose it in banks or waste it in drink. I trusted nothing but metal in my hands. Gold does not lie. Gold does not mock. Gold does not vanish in thin air. It waits, heavy and faithful. My daughter thought I was weak, but I was stronger than her whole world of parties and debts. Each purchase gave me a quiet strength. When she sneered at my old coat, I remembered the safe in the garden. When she mocked my shoes, I thought of the floorboard under my bed. When she laughed at my small meals, I thought of the attic boxes stacked with shining bars. Her words grew smaller in my heart with each secret I hid away. I never told anyone, not friends, not neighbors, not family. My silence was my shield. People who chase applause lose everything. People who stay quiet keep everything. I stayed quiet. I kept everything. By the end of 30 years, my secret was no longer small. It was heavy enough to change a life, strong enough to erase her mockery, powerful enough to make the sneers of others meaningless. My daughter thought I was poor. She thought I was powerless. She thought her success made her untouchable. She was wrong. Every insult she threw only made my patience stronger. Every laugh only made my plan sharper. When I walked into my house and saw the peeling paint, the broken chair, the old coat on the hanger, I smiled. Because I knew the truth. Poverty was only what I showed the world. Wealth was what I kept hidden in silence. 30 years of quiet accumulation, 30 years of secret patience, 30 years of letting them laugh while I built a future in gold. My daughter loved to show her pride. She wore it like a crown, bright and heavy. She paraded her new shoes, her polished car, her parties filled with lights and music. At family gatherings, she made sure everyone saw her victories, and she made sure they saw my coat too. My threadbare coat with its frayed sleeves, my shoes that had been polished so many times the leather was thin. She pointed at them with a smile sharp as glass. "Look at him," she said, laughing. "Still poor after all these years." The room joined her. The room laughed at the old man. I sat still and let it happen. I let their laughter ring in my ears. I bowed my head slightly, not in shame, but in patience. They thought I was beaten. They thought I was small. They thought their jokes had cut me. But while their laughter filled the room, my heart was far away, counting the gold I had stacked, remembering the safe under the garden stones, the floorboard under my bed. I wore their mockery like a cloak. It hid me, and it hid my secret. The mirror of those parties was cruel. She stood shining in her new dress, while I stood in my old coat. She held glasses of wine while I drank water. She raised her voice to speak of promotions, of her new furniture, of the trips she had taken. I spoke little, only answering when asked, and always softly. To them, she was the star. To them, I was the shadow. They did not know that shadows can hide more than light reveals. Sometimes she leaned close so everyone could hear. "Maybe one day he will save enough for new shoes," she would whisper, smiling wide. Everyone laughed again. I smiled too, but for another reason. Because while they looked at my shoes, they did not see my plan. While they saw poverty, they did not see the gold. I let them think I was nothing. That was my strength. There were times her words stung. Times I wanted to stand and shout, to tell them all the truth, to show them the bars hidden away, to prove that I was not the poor fool they thought I was. But shouting is wasted breath. Shouting shows anger, and anger is weakness. I swallowed my pride and stayed silent. Silence gave me power. Silence kept the truth mine alone. She thought her mocking made her strong. In truth, it revealed her blindness. She measured worth by clothes and cars, by houses and parties. She did not understand that wealth can live in silence, that gold does not need to be seen to exist. She mocked my coat, but she did not see the weight of my patience. She mocked my shoes, but she did not see the years of sacrifice I had turned into something solid, something untouchable. I wore her mockery the way a miner wears dust. It covered me, but beneath it, treasure waited. Every insult, every sneer, every public laugh was another layer hiding the truth. And the truth was growing heavier every year until the day would come when the mirror turned. When her pride would crack, when her laughter would die, when she would see that the man she mocked had always been the man holding all the power. The mocking mirror showed me as poor and her as rich. But mirrors can lie. Mirrors only show the surface. I knew what lay behind it. I knew what she could not imagine. And I waited. I am not a lawyer, but I learned enough to make my plan last. Money can be moved and names can be written. Paper is strong when it is done right. So I began with the papers. I did not shout. I did not tell anyone. I went to a small, honest lawyer I trusted. He was not flashy. He had no interest in my family life. He wanted clear facts and clean work. I told him my truth in short words. He listened. Then he asked the questions a paper needs. Who will own the house? Who will have the bank accounts? Who will be the one to open the boxes? I answered slowly. I had already decided. I had thought of these nights for years. I had kept my plan like a seed in my pocket. Now it was time to plant it in ink. We started with the house. The house had been in our family for years. She lived there like it was her right. She used it to show off. She used it to host loud parties and to point at me. The house would not stay under her name. I put it in a trust, not a trust that she could control, not a trust that her friends could reach. I chose a trust with a manager I had known since I was young. He was a simple man. He had no love for parties. He had no patience for liars. He would watch the house and make sure it was used for good things only. He would not hand keys to those who mocked a father. I wrote it down. I signed it. The deed changed hands with the stroke of a pen. It was small and quiet. It was final. Next, I moved money. I had set accounts in places that would not be easy to touch. Little by little, the bank names changed. New accounts were opened in my chosen names. Some went into funds that paid out in time, not all at once. I did this on purpose. People who spend fast cannot get the whole thing in a single night. I made the rules simple but strict. No single person could take everything. The rules said the money would be given only when certain things were true. Work must be steady. Proof must be shown. Respect must be proven. There were no tears and no speeches. There were papers and witnesses. There were signatures and stamps. Each stamp I put down was another wall between her and what she wanted. I made gifts on paper. Not gifts you can carry. Gifts that open slowly. I set up small funds for neighbors who had helped me in times when she laughed. I set up a small trust for a worker who fixed my roof once and never asked for thanks. I set up money for a charity that fed old men like me. These were small things. They were also smart things. When you give to kind hands, you make more kind hands in the world. When you cut the loud and proud from the circle, they have fewer people to clap for them. The papers did more than move money. They moved fate. I changed names on the accounts. I closed old shared accounts I had once opened for convenience. I removed powers of attorney that let others sign for me without asking. I chose a strong executor. Not my daughter. Not a friend of hers. A man who cared only for truth and law. I paid him a small fee. He agreed to watch. He signed with a steady hand. Once signed, the papers could not be turned back easily. Courts do not like to undo careful work. I took that comfort and held it like a warm stone. The lawyer taught me about clauses. A clause is a line that stops trouble before it grows. I asked for a clause that punished any person who tried to claim the money by lying. If they brought a fight to court, the papers said the challenger would lose and pay costs. That is not cruel. It is just smart. The law cares for clear words. I used clear words. I did not put anger in them. I put logic. Logic lasts longer than anger. I put the gold into clear hands. I could have left the bars in the ground like a secret forever. But gold buried in dirt is hard to use when you are old. So I sold part of it to Clean Holdings. I did this quietly. The gold became clean money with clean paper behind it. Then that money went into the trusts and accounts I had made. Some bars I kept for emergencies. Some I sold and put into investments that would pay slowly and safely. No quick sales. No flashy moves. Just slow, steady work on paper. Paper that cannot be burned by a shout. All my actions were small and hidden. I did not call my daughter to tell her I was changing things. I did not gloat. I did not warn. Warnings give time to fight back. I wanted no chance for words to twist my plan. So I signed alone, in a quiet office, with 2 witnesses. The lawyer prepared the files. He explained the steps. File here, stamp there, mail a notice after the deeds change. It was not dramatic. It was precise. The law moves slow when it is right. I moved with it. When the final papers were ready, I did one more thing. I wrote a short note for my daughter. Not to be cruel, but to be clear. I told her I had done what I thought best. I told her I wanted my life to do good after me. The note was not long. It had no threats. It had no anger. It had the tone of a man who had sat long with his choice and was sure. Then I asked the lawyer to send the legal notice. Certified mail. The kind that shows proof. No shouting. No public scenes. Just a letter that said the law had changed. The paperwork seed is a quiet thing. You cannot see it grow at first. It looks like thin paper and ink. But paper can bend the world. The papers I signed changed who could enter the house. They changed who could touch the money. They changed who could live in the rooms where my daughter laughed. I used law, not rage. I used time, not noise. I used small, strong things that break loud dreams. When the marks were made, I felt calm. Not happy. Calm. The calm of a man who knows his hand will not be taken by the ones who spat on it. I had planned for years in silence. Now the seed was planted. The roots were deep. The house, the funds, the gold, all held by paper and by witnesses who could speak truth. No friend of hers could reach it with a smile. No party could buy back the keys. I had made my move. I had given my patient work to the future in a way that could not be knocked over by loud laughter. That is the thing about paper. It listens to truth. It does not care for how loud you are. It cares for how careful you are. I had been careful for 30 years. Now the careful work stood firm. Before the final move, I gave her small tests. I wanted to see her heart with no disguise. I wanted proof of what I already knew. So I spoke of small things. I told her once that maybe I could help with her mortgage, though my voice was weak and low. She laughed. She said I could not even help myself, let alone her. Her friends laughed too. They called me a charity case. I smiled and stayed quiet. What she did not know was that the bank already had the last of her mortgage papers signed and sealed by me, paid months ahead, not in her name, in mine. At brunch, she liked to boast. She told her friends how she supported me, how she let me live under her roof, how poor I was without her. I nodded, silent, sipping water while she drank wine. She thought she had power because she could mock me in front of others. But I had already planted the end in her own walls. The deed had been changed. The papers were already clear. The roof she thought was hers was no longer hers at all. I tested her with words too. I told her I had some savings left, asked if she wanted me to help her with one of her loans. She waved her hand like brushing away dust. "Keep your coins, old man," she said. "I don't need your pennies." She thought her words cut me, but they only confirmed what I already knew. She saw me as nothing. That day I smiled again, because I knew soon she would learn the truth. Even when she asked for small things, her tone was sharp. She asked me to wash her car once, calling it something useful I could do. I did it without a word. While I wiped the dust, I thought of the gold I had stacked for 30 years. I thought of the trust funds, the accounts offshore, the clauses in the will that shut her out. Every stroke of the cloth across her car was another quiet laugh in my chest. She thought she had won. She thought she was in control. She did not know her control was already gone. Neighbors sometimes hinted at her cruelty. They saw how she spoke to me in public, how she called me poor, how she laughed too loud at my expense. I brushed it off, saying she was just joking. Inside, I let their words fuel me. I let them remind me of why I had stayed patient. I let them sharpen the blade I carried in silence. Not a real blade, but the sharper thing called truth. Every test I gave her, she failed. Every chance to show kindness, she chose cruelty. Every chance to show respect, she chose mockery. I kept count in my heart. Each failure was another nail in the coffin of her comfort. By the time I was done testing her, I no longer doubted. I no longer hoped she might change. I knew her pride was too heavy. I knew her laughter was too cruel. I knew she thought my silence was weakness. But silence is not weakness. Silence is a wall. Behind that wall, I had built my plan. Behind that wall, I had stored my wealth. Behind that wall, I had written her out of everything. So I let her laugh at her own table. I let her friends raise glasses to her while they looked at me with pity. I smiled when she called me a burden. I even thanked her when she let me sit in the corner. She thought she was winning. But all the while, I was moving numbers in the bank, shifting names on papers, turning 30 years of silence into one final storm. Her laughter was the sound of her own rope tightening. My silence was the sound of the knot pulling. The day came quiet, with frost on the ground and silence in the air. I woke early, before the sun rose. I dressed in the same old coat she always mocked, the one with worn sleeves. To her it was a symbol of weakness. To me, it was armor. I walked slowly to the lawyer's office. Each step felt like 30 years pressing down, and yet also lifting away. My pockets were empty, but my plan was full. This was the day the seed of paperwork became a tree with roots too deep to pull. Inside the office, the lawyer laid out the final stack of papers. Clean, sharp, waiting. He looked at me carefully, asking once more if I was certain. I nodded. My voice was steady. Do it. I had lived in silence for too long to turn back now. He slid the papers across the desk. My hands, though old and bent, did not shake. With each signature, I cut her name away. With each stroke of ink, I built a wall between her and the life she thought was hers. The house deed was signed over. No longer hers to claim, no longer a stage for her laughter. It was placed into the trust I had built, guarded by a man who knew my wishes and owed her nothing. The roof she flaunted was now untouchable. She would walk under it for a little longer, never knowing it had already slipped from her hands. The accounts were shifted. The lawyer stamped the transfers. The money flowed quietly, not with noise or drama, but with precision. Some into offshore holdings, some into timed accounts, some into funds that rewarded work, not mockery. Each move was a lock. Each stamp was a door closing behind me. I had no need to shout, no need to announce. The law was my hammer. Paper was my revenge. The gold, too, was moved. I sold what needed to be sold, turned metal into clean records, into assets that bore my name alone. Some I kept hidden, small pieces still buried, reminders of my patience. But most of it became untouchable, beyond her reach, beyond her laughter. It was no longer a secret dream. It was a weapon made real. When the last signature was placed, I sat back in the chair. I did not smile. I did not cry. I simply breathed. 30 years of patience, 30 years of insults, 30 years of silence. All of it had led to this morning. The lawyer gathered the papers, placed them neatly in a file, and locked them away. The sound of the lock was soft, but to me it was thunder. It was finality. There was no call to her, no warning, no speech. Revenge does not need noise. Revenge is better when it arrives in silence, carried by envelopes and keys that no longer fit. She thought she had time. She thought her laughter was safe. She thought the house was hers forever. But time had already betrayed her. I walked out of the office into the cold morning. The frost crunched beneath my shoes. My breath rose in the air like smoke. I did not feel lighter. I did not feel heavier. I felt steady. For the first time in 3 decades, I carried no secret. The plan was no longer hidden in the ground. It was written in law. It was sealed in ink. It could not be undone. I looked up at the sky. Gray clouds moved slow, heavy but calm. That was how I felt. Heavy but calm. I had waited 30 years. I had listened to her mockery. I had endured her laughter. And now, without a word, I had taken back everything she thought she owned. She would not know today. She would not know tomorrow. But the day was already set. The door was already closed. The final move was not loud. It was not violent. It was a man signing his name on paper while frost lay on the ground. It was patience turning into power. It was silence turning into steel. And once done, there was no turning back. It happened just days later. She came home late, her shoes clicking on the driveway, perfume strong, laughter still hanging on her breath from the party she had just left. She held her phone in one hand, chatting with her friends, her voice full of pride. But when she reached the front step, something was wrong. The key in her hand did not fit the lock. She tried again, jiggling, forcing, shaking the knob. The door did not move. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She pulled out her phone, called the locksmith, even laughed nervously to her friends. "Must be stuck," she said. But then a van pulled up, and men stepped out. Movers, with papers in their hands. Behind them came the solicitor, the one my lawyer trusted. He carried the documents, stamped and signed. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply read. Her smile broke when she heard the words. The deed was no longer in her name. The trust now owned the house. She had no right, no lease, no claim. What she thought was hers had already slipped away, days ago, sealed in ink. Her face flushed red, her lips trembled. "This is my house," she shouted. But the solicitor shook his head. Calm, firm. "It is not. The law is clear." Her friends stood by, their laughter gone. Some stared, some whispered. One by one they stepped back, their faces pale. They watched the woman who once mocked her father now banging on a door she no longer owned. She pleaded, begged, cursed, but the lock stayed cold in her hand. The papers spoke louder than her cries. She tried to call me. My phone rang, but I did not answer. For 30 years I had answered every call, to fix, to pay, to serve. Not this time. This time, her voice went into silence. She screamed into the empty night, but the law does not answer screams. The movers carried boxes out. Her clothes, her furniture, her shiny shoes, all of it stacked on the curb. Neighbors peeked through curtains, some stepping outside, shaking their heads. Word spread quickly. The woman who had boasted of wealth, who had mocked the man in the old coat, had been cut off. She stood outside her own house with nothing but her voice, and even that could not open the door. I was not there to see it. I did not need to be. The solicitor told me later, calm and detailed. He said her face went from proud to pale, from pale to red, from red to blank. He said she shouted until her voice cracked, then fell to her knees on the cold step. He said she begged strangers to believe her, but no one did. The law had already spoken. That night, she had no roof. Her friends drove away, one by one, leaving her with boxes on the curb. She called, but no one came. She sat in the cold, wrapped in the coat she once mocked me for wearing. For the first time, she knew what it meant to be powerless. The discovery came not with violence, not with warning, but with silence. A door that no longer opened. A key that no longer fit. A paper read aloud while neighbors watched. That was the price of 30 years of laughter at my expense. That was the sound of patience turning into power. After the night she found herself locked out, the story spread faster than smoke in the wind. Neighbors talked, friends whispered. Soon the whole street knew. The daughter who had mocked her father, the daughter who called him poor, the daughter who bragged of her success, was now cut off, her house gone, her pride stripped in front of everyone. She had built her name on laughter and show. Now she was the joke. Her friends stopped answering her calls. The same people who had drunk her wine and danced at her parties left her messages unread. She sent long texts full of excuses, but silence replied. No one wanted to be close to a woman who had been exposed so publicly. Pride attracts a crowd. Humiliation leaves you standing alone. Creditors circled like wolves. The banks she thought she could play with now demanded what she owed. She had borrowed to fund her shining image. The shoes, the cars, the endless parties. Without the house in her name, without access to money she thought was hers, she had nothing to show them. Notices piled up. Letters in red ink came through the mail. Her smile grew thinner with each one. She tried to host one more party, desperate to keep her mask. She sent out invitations, promising music and food. But when the night came, the house was no longer hers, and no one showed. Her laughter, once loud, turned hollow. She sat alone in a borrowed flat, staring at empty glasses on the table, pretending guests would still come. They never did. At work, whispers followed her too. People who once praised her for her style now whispered about her cruelty. They remembered the way she mocked me in front of family. They remembered the way she called me a burden. Respect is fragile. It shatters fast. Her co-workers kept their distance, smiling politely but never standing close. She felt it. Every step through the office hall was another cut of silence. Even her closest friends began to move away. They did not want to be linked with someone who had fallen so far. In this world, success draws company, but failure leaves you cold. She begged some for help. A loan, a place to stay, a kind word. Most said nothing. A few told her the truth. You should have treated your father better. Those words struck her harder than any debt. I heard all this from neighbors, from whispers that came back to me. I did not seek the news, but it found me. I did not laugh. I did not cheer. I sat in my chair, listening, quiet. For years, she made me the center of her jokes. Now she was the story whispered in the street. The mirror had turned. Her pride shrank to nothing. She no longer walked tall at gatherings. She no longer flaunted her car or clothes. Even the car was gone, taken by the bank. The shoes grew old, worn down, and no new ones replaced them. The woman who once stood with shining friends now sat alone, her head low, her phone silent. Social collapse is not sudden. It is slow, step by step. A laugh here, a whisper there, a door closed, a call unanswered, a friend gone. Soon you look around and realize the world has left you. That is what happened to her. The world she built on show and mockery crumbled piece by piece until only the truth remained. She had mocked me for being poor. Now she understood poverty. Not just poverty of money, but poverty of respect, of company, of dignity. She had thought my silence meant weakness. But silence was strength. It was the silence that cut her world down. I will not lie and say I danced when she fell. Revenge is not joy. It is not wine or music. It is a stone in the chest, heavy even when you win. The night the movers left her boxes on the curb, I sat alone in my chair. The house was quiet. The clock ticked on the wall. I thought of the 30 years I had spent saving, hiding, waiting. I thought of the years I had spent listening to her laugh at me in front of others. And I thought of the silence now. It was victory, yes, but it was also emptiness. The price of patience is high. You carry insult after insult and you bury it deep. You let it build inside until it becomes iron. And when you finally strike, it is not a cheer that comes out. It is only silence. I gained my dignity back. I gained peace from her cruelty. But I also lost what little warmth might have been left between us. That cannot be brought back. Sometimes late at night, I remember her as a child. I remember holding her hand when she was small. I remember her laughter then, not cruel, but innocent. I wonder when that laughter turned sharp. I wonder when pride replaced kindness. Those memories cut me deeper than her insults, because they remind me that revenge, even when it is right, takes something from you too. Yet I know it had to be done. I could not let her walk over me forever. I could not let her laugh without cost. If I had stayed silent until the end, I would have died with no dignity. She would have mocked me even at my funeral. That thought was colder than the silence I feel now. So I chose this path. I chose to pay the price. I do not walk past her old house with a smile. I walk past it with a steady step. I look at the windows, empty now, and I think of the nights I sat inside, listening to her laugh at me across the table. The house itself is nothing to me. What matters is that I no longer fear her voice. What matters is that I no longer bow my head in shame. Some nights the silence is too loud. I sit in my chair and wonder if there was another way. But I always come back to the same truth. Respect is not given, it is taken. She left me no choice. She burned every bridge with her cruelty. I simply closed the last door. The private price I carry is the weight of knowing she is my blood, and yet I had to cut her out like a stranger. But the quiet dignity I have now is worth more than her false love ever was. She lost everything because of her mockery. I lost the image of a daughter I once thought I had. Both losses are final. Both cannot be undone. And so I sit with the silence. Heavy, yes, but steady. My gold bought me freedom she never imagined. For 30 years I wore the mask of poverty, and she believed it. She mocked me for it. She paraded her laughter, certain she was above me. But every coin I hid, every bar I stacked, every paper I signed was waiting for the day she would learn the truth. That day came, and it came without warning, without shouting, without mercy. She thought the world was hers. In one moment, it was gone. I remained out of sight. I did not watch her cry. I did not answer her calls. I lived in a place where my dignity was safe, my gold secured, my nights no longer filled with her voice. She was left to face the cold truth alone, that pride built on cruelty has no foundation, that mockery has a cost, that even blood can turn away when respect is lost. She lost her house. She lost her friends. She lost her image. I lost nothing but the weight of her insults. I carried that weight for decades, and now it was gone. I could breathe again, even if the breath carried no joy. I did not need joy. I needed peace. And peace is what I took back. She walks now in borrowed shoes, sleeps in borrowed rooms, while I walk steady with my silence. She cannot laugh at me anymore. She cannot call me poor anymore. Her voice has been taken from her, just as she once tried to take mine. Final thought. She mocked my poverty. I let her laugh. I let her sneer. I let her believe I was nothing. And then I turned 30 years of patience into a quiet, irreversible goodbye. My silence cost her everything.